Hello everybody. Today I can write the equation of a perpendicular bisector by finding the slope and midpoint and using point slope formula. So we have the steps here. I'm going to talk about it first, and then we'll get back to the steps of what a perpendicular bisector actually is. So let's kind of take a look at the first example here. I've got a line segment whose endpoints are 3, 5. Should probably get my pen going on here. 3, 5, and 5, 9. And I want the perpendicular bisector of that. So let's break that down into two separate words. Perpendicular. Well, perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. We learned in an earlier lesson that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Reciprocal slopes. So the equation of the perpendicular line, of the perpendicular bisector, its slope must be the negative reciprocal of this slope. So because of that, I'm going to have to find the slope of this line using your slope formula. Bisector. Bisector cuts in half at the midpoint. So if my line is going to cut this line in half, then I need to find the midpoint of this line, because I know that my perpendicular bisector must go through the midpoint. So I'm going to have to find midpoint using the midpoint formula. X1 plus X2 over 2, Y1 plus Y2 over 2. Once I have the slope and a point that it goes through, to write the equation of a line, that's y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. So this is kind of a long problem. There's going to be 3 separate steps to them, and conceptually there's a lot of concepts to it. This would probably be a 4-point question if it's open response, but we're going to go through it. We're going to do it. So now that we talked about it, let's just take a look at the steps. Your first 2 steps are going to be to calculate the midpoint using the midpoint formula and calculating the slope using the slope formula. It does not matter in which order you calculate the midpoint of the slope. Now I'm going to find the perpendicular slope by taking the negative reciprocal of the original slope. So my original slope, whatever I get, I take the negative reciprocal of that, which we did in the last unit. And then once I have my slope and I have my point, I substitute it into point slope formula. So let's do it. If you're not comfortable calculating slope and distance and midpoint, then you need to go back to those lessons and make sure you get comfortable calculating slope and distance and midpoint. We don't need distance for this particular lesson, but in general, you definitely need to be able to do distance. So I'm going to start with my slope. Slope equals delta y over delta x. So I'm starting here, up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2. 4 over 2 is 2. Now I'm going to calculate the midpoint. Midpoint is the average of the x values, add them and divide by 2, comma the average of the y values, add them and divide by 2. 3 plus 5 over 2, 5 plus 9 over 2. 3 plus 5 is 8 over 2, 5 plus 9 is 14 over 2. Midpoint is 4, 7. So let's talk about my line now. My line is going to have a slope that's perpendicular to the original slope. So if the original slope is 2, the negative reciprocal of that is negative 1/2. And it's going to go through the midpoint of the original line segment, which is 4, 7. So now space here, y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. Remember, in this formula, if you're not comfortable with this formula, go back to that lesson. Go back to that video and watch it, equations of a line through a point. You're negating the y1 and the x1, so the positive 4 and positive 7 is going to become minus 4 and minus 7. So it becomes y minus 7 equals negative 1/2 x minus 4. That's your answer. If it's multiple choice, you might need to distribute and isolate y. So we can do that. Why not? We don't have to do that here because it's not saying to put it in the other form. But just for practice, if I distribute it, I get that. And isolate, I get y equals negative 1/2 x plus 9. So either one of these forms is fine. It's good to know how to go back and forth between them. So again, this is definitely a long problem. To find perpendicular bisector, we first find the slope, then we find the midpoint using the slope and the midpoint formula. Understand that perpendicular means negative reciprocal slopes, so my slope is the negative reciprocal of the original slope. My midpoint is my x1 and my y1, and then I take those values and I substitute them into point slope formula to get my answer. The bad news, it's long. There's a lot of steps to it. The good news is there's no twist. There's 0 twists to this. It's just doing the calculations. It's the same exact thing every time. Okay. Let's take a look at number 2. Negative 1, 5, 1, 1. I want to find the perpendicular bisector. I need to find the slope. I need to find the midpoint. I want you to pause, calculate the slope and the midpoint, and then unpause. Okay, now that you calculated the slope and the midpoint, I will go over it. Down 1, 2, 3, 4 over 2. Negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. Midpoint, the x's are negative 1 and 1. The y's are 5 and 1. That's 0 over 2, comma 6 over 2. That's 0, comma 3. So let's talk about my line now. My slope, since it's perpendicular to the original line, is the negative reciprocal of negative 2, which is 1/2. x1, y1 are the coordinates of the midpoint, 0 and 3. To write the equation of a line through a point, y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. Y minus 3 equals 2, x minus 0. You can leave it like that. Or you can distribute. You can kind of just drop the 0 off there. That would be 2x. And you would get y equals 2x plus 3. Either form is fine. That's it. So again, find the slope using slope formula. Find the midpoint using midpoint formula. Take the negative reciprocal of your slope because a perpendicular line has negative reciprocal slopes. Use the coordinates of the midpoint as x1 and y1 and substitute those into point slope formula. Y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. This lesson is literally a combination of 3 lessons: slope, midpoint, and equation of a line through a point. So if you're not comfortable with either of those, go back to those and practice that, and then come back to this. So There's really not much more to do. I want you to try number 3 on your own right now. So please pause, try number 3 on your own, and then unpause. Okay, now that you tried number 3 on your own, I will go over it for you. -3203. To find the perpendicular bisector, first I'm going to find slope. That would be 1/3. Then I'm going to find midpoint, which is x1 plus x2 over 2, comma y1 plus y2 over 2. -3 and 0. 2 plus 3. That's -3 over 2 and 5 over 2, which is -1.5, comma 2.5. Don't be afraid of the decimals. Now that I have that, my slope is the negative reciprocal of this slope. The negative reciprocal of 1/3 is -3. x1, y1 is going to be -1.5 and 2.5. Y minus y1 equals m. X minus x1. Y minus 2.5 equals -3. X plus 1.5. Remember, in point slope form, you're changing the sign of x1 and y1. Now, that's fine. You can leave your answer like that. If you want to put it into slope-intercept form, mx plus b form, you have to distribute. And I isolate y. You would get y equals -3x minus 2. Either one is fine. The point, the goal, the objective is to understand how to write the equation of a perpendicular bisector. So again, what did I do? I found the slope using slope formula. I found the midpoint using midpoint formula. I wrote my slope, x1 and y1. My slope, which is perpendicular, because it says perpendicular bisector, is the negative reciprocal of the original slope. x1, y1 are the coordinates of the midpoint. And then I'm substituting that into your point slope formula. Your y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. So again, this lesson you need slope, you need midpoint, and you need equation of a line through a point. We did 2 lessons on equation of a line through a point because it's so important. So if you're not comfortable with any 3 of those, then go back to that now and then come back to this. So again, to sum up, I can write the equation of a perpendicular bisector by finding the slope and midpoint using those formulas, and then using point slope formula, which is that. Remember that perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes, so make sure you flip and negate the original slope to get the perpendicular slope. Your classwork/homework is the finished perpendicular bisector. Have a great day.